So we're going to get right into it because there's a lack of time, right? And it's a fascinating book. I spent the last 3 nights just racing through it. It was unput down over. So I'm glad to be doing this with you today. To go into your background, right? You've been an advertising professional for many years, and then you went into writing fiction, and you've written several fictional books, over 10 books.
Yeah.
So what made you make that switch?
See, advertising burns you out very fast. And then after a point, you get bored of doing the same old thing.
Right.
So even when I was in advertising, I was writing a regular column for Deccan Herald and News Time and Times of India.
I see.
And I always wanted to write fiction.
Okay.
I think since I was a little girl.
Yeah.
So the minute I left advertising, I started writing fiction.
Okay.
And it wasn't a very easy transition because in advertising, they tell you to cut down your words. You know what you can say in 20 words, say it in 6.
True.
Or, you know, what would take 30 minutes to
Right.
product,
Yeah.
you have to say it in 12 seconds or 15 seconds. So you're used to cutting down your words.
Right.
Whereas in this, when I wrote my first book,
Yeah.
I found it came out a very slim volume of 100 pages. So then I had to go back and add a lot of descriptions and, you know, emotions and things.
Yeah. So like fleshing out the body,
fleshed it
so to
out,
speak.
yes. Yeah.
Okay. Do you enjoy this or the fizzle and pop of advertising?
Well, I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah.
And I enjoy this now, but I'm not very regular with my writing these days.
No, but you've written over 8 books, right, before this?
but
That's a lot.
I could have written more.
Spoken like a true author. Now, this particular book, right, which is, I think, all the more fascinating because it's based on a true story. And it rocked colonial India this is all pre-independence, right, in the 1920s. What made you switch to a non-fiction type of historical fiction book after having written these fictional books?
See, for this book, the entire credit goes to my mother-in-law.
Oh, I see.
She was the most fascinating storyteller of them all.
I see.
So she was close to this Kelkar family.
Okay.
And she'd tell me about, when we were passing through past Chowpatty, she'd wave very airily and said, that Mumtaz dear, I think, lives in one of those buildings. So, and she said, she got her nose cut off by the Maharaja.
This is actually true, by the way.
And it's a true fact. And in those days, when I was much younger, it just didn't occur to me that, you know, there was a big story in there.
Right.
Much later now, recently, I said, oh my God, what a story that will be.
How did you get into the story, though? Like, what tipped you off?
Credit to my daughter-in-law here. Hello, I was telling her the story of how one part of our family got very rich.
Right.
So she said, how did they get so much money?
Right.
So I said, because the great-granduncle defended the Maharaja of Kelkar in this case.
Ah.
And then I said, oh my God, there's a huge, big story in this. So then I started doing my research.
Okay.
And it is incredible. It's like they say, life is stranger than fiction. It's like that.
Yes. Now, when you talk about it being historical fiction, right, what percentage of the facts are embellishments? Because there's so much detail in your story. There's so much detail.
Okay. The facts are all, the storyline is all facts.
Okay.
Every human being mentioned there is somebody who's there in history.
Okay.
Everything that happened is a fact.
Okay.
The fiction I've added is I've given the lady, the Mumtaz, Courtesan.
Yeah. So the character has depth because of your work.
She is
okay.
reacting to all that happened in her life
Right.
from age 13 to 25.
Yes. And such a young girl.
It's her reaction that's fiction because that's not documented anywhere.
Sure.
There is one picture of hers on the internet which in no way and nowhere is she mentioned as beautiful.
Right.
No one's talking about her voice.
Right.
But it just so happened that when she was 13, she went into the employ of this Maharaja.
Right.
And she wanted out.
Yeah, can you just, without it, honestly, even if you hear the story, you'll still want to read the book. So if you can give the audience a brief synopsis of the storyline, because it's such a fascinating, hard-to-believe story that even if you know it, you'll want to read the book.
This was a time when tawaifs, courtesans, were repositories of our art and culture. You know, thanks to them, we have dadras and tumris and music succession coming down, legacy coming down to us. And they
Like the
were-
gharanas are actually based on the tawaifs. I didn't know that.
Begum Akhtar was a tawaif to start with. So that was a time when it wasn't a sleazy profession as it is now. And she's a third generation tawaif. And she went through all the training and very rigorous training in dance and music and, you know, a lot of social culture, social attributes and things like that, which was required for a high-class tawaif. And when she was 13, her mother who was also a tawaif, and she was aging, so took her to perform at this royal palace in Indore. When she was 11, her first performance when she was 11. And obviously she was ready to perform at that point. She had the tayyari, as they say. So she performed and she got a lot of, let's say, applause and whatever, and she was well rewarded. And when she went back, when she was 13, is when the Maharaja wanted to employ her as the chief courtesan of the country, of his regime. So she was employed at the very, let's say, high scale of 1,200 rupees a month, which was paid to her mother. And then, and that was 1920s. So she was very well off. She was housed in the palace grounds in a cottage. She had a driver and servants and everything. But the thing is, for some reason, nobody knows why or how, she wanted out. She wanted a normal life. She wanted somebody to love her and not just use her in a sort of a sexual context. And when she was, and every time she got a child, the Maharaja and his, let's say, his machinery got it aborted. And that hurt her a lot. And finally, when she gave birth to a child, they took it away and killed it. I think it was a girl. So at which point she rebelled, she went into a decline, she went into a depression. And even her mother got very alarmed. Mother was very, money conscious at that point of time. But when this girl was falling apart due to depression, she agreed to the fact that they needed to go. And this Maharaja wouldn't let her go. So wherever, and they took a chance when they were all going off to Mussoorie, as they did every summer. They got off one station before at a place called Bahana or something. Bhanpur. So they got off at that place, approached the police, the British police in those days, and asked for shelter, which they got. And then from there they went to Amritsar, they were hounded. Then they went to somewhere else, they were hounded. Then they went to Hyderabad, they were hounded. They were hounded all over India like criminals. Because this man, he had unlimited resources, and he sent his people to get her back alive. He wanted her alive. Maybe his ego was hurt, because not that he was very faithful to her, or she was the favorite or whatever. He was always has a lot of people coming and dancing and entertaining him or whatever. And he had 2 wives at that time. So it wasn't that he was madly in love with her. It was the royal ego that was hurt. And they were hounded from place to place to place. Finally, she ended up in Bombay. And she found a young man who was a commoner, but he was wealthy and was well off, chap called Baula, who kept her as his mistress. And she was happy. She was expecting his child. And when these men started hounding her, they were sending her notes, and they were threatening her, and they were threatening him, and they were, they kept track. He had some 20 people placed in Bombay just to keep track of her whereabouts, just to see that she came back to him. And at one point, he even had her kidnapped, and she ran away again. So he wanted her back alive. And these people used to go, that Baula and she used to go to Malabar Hill every evening for a drive, hanging
Should we
gardens.
stop now so that they can read the rest?
Say it all.
Yeah, I don't think you should. Yeah, I don't think you should
Okay.
give away the ending.
Okay.
But I did want to ask you, there's something interesting that you just mentioned about, fleshing out her character and what she would have gone through this entire experience. And you mentioned the talkies. You say the talkies, which of course are the movies. And you talk about how that gave her inspiration in imagining what a life well lived would look like. And I want to ask you, how much do you think Bollywood impacts the way young people think life is supposed to be?
Now, the small towns is so impacted by Bollywood. But can you imagine at that time when all the courtesans were getting into films?
Yes.
You had Wahid and Bai, and you had
Yes.
Nargis's mother,
Yes.
and you had Nimi's mother. So all of them were becoming film stars.
Amazing.
And this girl used to see these little black and white movies and shanty little talkies.
Right.
And she nurtured an aspiration to join the films. That's why they came to Bombay, I think.
Yeah, you've done a lot of research on, the traditions and the lifestyles of the courtesans. Where did you actually do this work? Was it in Bombay, or did you have to travel the country?
Well, not the country, but I did a lot of research in Bombay.
Yeah, where in Bombay?
Royal Asiatic Library. Then there is another collection of old books and old newspapers in Elphinstone College. Then the police records, then the judicial records of the time. So I spent about a year and a half just doing research.
Wow.
Then also there is one book in Marathi, which somebody got translated for me. So that had a lot of
I
details
see.
that I could take.
On courtesan life?
No, not on Courtesan life. On this lady, on
On
Mumtaz.
Mumtaz herself.
Begum, yeah.
Okay. So the Brits seem to keep a lot of records then. I mean, the fact that you could get all the
newspapers of that time.
Okay.
This was you remember, I don't know if many of us remember the Nanavati case, how big it was. So this was much bigger than that in 1925. And not only in India, it went all over the world because everybody at that time, had heard about Indian Maharajas, so to say. But they didn't realize the kind of lifestyle these people lived and what the courtesans were and what the Maharajas were all about. So this went all over the world and the world was fascinated by the kind of details they received. So she became let's say a global figure for at least for a couple of months because everybody kept saying, who is she? Is she very beautiful? Is she this? Why should a Maharaja be so fascinated? Nobody knows.
Wow, amazing. Amazing at that time for a single story to capture so much of the global attention.
That was the time. I've also done a lot of social political research.
Yes.
So that was the time when India was coming together as a country.
Yes.
And the Maharajas had been cultivated by the Britishers
Yes.
as buffers between them and the masses because they couldn't have another, mutiny like 1957 again.
Right.
So the Maharajas were very cultivated.
Yeah.
They had nothing to do except spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they were kept happy with 19-gun salute and 21-gun salute and 25, which meant nothing. But they were happy as schoolboys at prize giving or whatever because somebody gave them 21-gun salute. And who the hell,
So the Maharaja of Indore had actually quite a few many gun salutes to his honor,
yes,
right?
I think he had 21-gun salute.
That was the second highest.
And he was a very popular Maharaja with the Britishers. Because he kowtowed, he didn't follow the line and whatever, towed the line and things.
Yeah. And but by the end of this, he had to abdicate the throne.
He had to abdicate.
So it's quite extraordinary what impact it had on his own life. Yeah. Now, you've written another historical fiction type of book or a book that's based in history. I haven't read it myself, but it's called Mayurkand,
The book
right?
before this was called Mayurkand, but that was not a fact-based book. It was entirely fabricated.
Okay.
But it also has royalty and it also deals with a small little Thikana in Rajasthan.
Okay. Interesting that you've chosen a similar sort of a, conceptual framework this time. Do you think that royalty has relevance in our world, in the modern world that we live in today?
Not today, but in a way they're fascinating because they live such larger-than-life lives.
True, yeah.
And they were not bound by, middle-class ethics or morals like we are.
Yeah.
They did pretty much what they felt like. So in that sense, they're fascinating. Not anymore, of course, but let's say the generation before us.
Yeah. Is there a historical fiction little book in the offing now next?
Well, I haven't started anything yet, but my next book will be on, it's called Partitions People. So families who've been fractured by the partition. So it's now 70 years since.
Yes.
So, but those things continue in families.
Yes. I think the trauma is very much
goes down
present.
Yeah.
Yes, true. When we look at Mumtaz's life, right, and we look at how her freedom was so restricted, do you think women in India can still relate to that? Is there something about that that's relatable outside of the Tawayef connection?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. That's why it's so fascinating that people lived that kind of lives in those days.
Yeah.
And she was a very, let's say, barely educated. She never went to school beyond some third, fourth standard.
Yes.
Whatever her schooling was done at home.
Yeah.
And yet she had the guts to stand up to this very powerful monarch.
And she was very young.
She was 25 and the entire case revolved around her.
Yes, yes.
So, it shows a lot of guts.
100%. She's obviously a remarkable woman, no question. I mean...
And there's nothing to make her that remarkable. Nothing in her background or her mother or nobody. Nothing.
Yeah. We don't know about her father, though. So maybe...
No, father left them when she was born.
Right.
And then the mother married a sort of stepfather later.
Okay, yeah, there's that, right? Yeah. And you've also done a lot of research on the music.
Yes.
The significance of the music and its
passion.
context in her life and in the life of a courtesan. Would you like to elaborate on that?
No, it's just I learn Hindustani music, so that is my passion. And even Mayur Khan, the protagonist, was a singer.
Yeah.
So it gives me a chance to explore what I've learned, and
Yes.
and the nuances that these people learn, the Tawaifs learn, and the kind of art that they have to have, and that is very, very fascinating.
So the whole art of the Thumri comes from this tradition?
Not really. Thumri was a creation of Wajid Ali Shah.
Okay.
But it's been preserved and handed down the generations by Tawaifs.
I see. Okay.
And at one point, I think even the well-to-do lords and nobility would send their children to a Tawaif to learn social arts, social graces.
I see.
How to say whatever, how to accept this and how to say thank you, whatever.
Yeah.
So they were actually in training with these people because they were considered the repositories of culture.
Of art and high culture.
Art, culture, music.
Like the Japanese geishas, I suppose.
Yes, I
right?
suppose. So.
Very
But
similar.
then with the Victorian England, they became sleazy and they became prostitutes and they went downhill.
And you color the colonial sort of presence. You sort of there's almost like a disdain to them in the way you write about them. So what was the feeling as you were writing about the Brits?
See, those were the times, and you can't extract a person from his background, his or her background. So those were the times they lived and thrived in.
Yes.
So, and there were difficult times, not difficult times, but times of transitions for the Maharaja also, because they didn't know whether to follow Gandhi or to cling on to their lifestyle. That was 1925 was a good, say, 20 years before
our independence.
Independence, but the movement was burgeoning, had started.
Yeah.
And there were secret meetings happening, and some of them were encouraging the meetings, and some were not. So it was one of those very chaotic times.
And was Indore like a seat of foment at that time, the beginning
Not really. He was a very sort of a favorite of the Britishers. There was not much foment, but whatever secret meetings were happening, perhaps he knew about them, but he chose not to align with that.
The way that you describe the family of Mumtaz reaching out to the police and expecting support and receiving it, it's almost like things were better then. I hate saying that, but it does seem like that. Like there seemed more structure then, or is it just the way that?
You mean the police and the support?
Yeah.
I think there were fewer people, and what was very creditable is the entire government machinery supported her.
Yes.
At least in Bombay, they supported her.
Yes.
Which was very, very, because she was nobody. She was just a disenfranchised, illiterate woman.
Yeah.
But the entire government machinery supported her. The media supported her because even when the guilty were pronounced guilty, which were the henchmen who were sent to Bombay to have her kidnapped.
Yes.
The judge, the British Chief Justice, he said, I have passed a judgment, but justice has not been served.
Yes.
Because everybody knew who the hidden hand was behind this.
Yes.
Because all the culprits who either got life sentence or some were hung till they died, they were all in the employ of the government of Indore. So, and then the media got into the act. They said, these are not the killers. Why are we punishing them? And they were so terrified. He was such a powerful king.
Yes.
That they wouldn't name him. But they all said the hidden hand is somewhere else. So when the media got into it, then the Britishers had to do something about it. So, I mean, everybody knew who he was,
Right.
but they wouldn't mention his name.
Now, subsequent generations of the Indore family, have they apologized?
No, not at all.
Not at all. There's no question of that happening.
No question.
They're just pretending like it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
Okay. Anything else that you feel is important to share about the book that will inspire people to read
you
it?
stopped me from coming down to the denouement.
Feel free to share it. I want people to read it, that's all.
So these people used to go for evening stroll at Hanging Gardens, which I'm sure all of us are familiar with. And there used to be a live band there, so they used to get out of this huge big Studebaker and stroll around. That's where these 6 killers got into a car and went and tried to drag her out of this Baula's car. And at that time, she was carrying his baby. So when they tried to drag her, he came in between and he got a bullet in his stomach. And he was a bystander, he was innocent.
And she was pregnant at the time.
She was pregnant.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, there was this group of British soldiers who had played golf in Willingdon Club and they were going home and they would go straight past Hughes Road or whatever. This particular day, there's one of them, I don't know why he decided, he said, I still don't know why I decided
Very interesting.
to turn in.
Yeah.
So he turned and went up the hill, Malabar Hill, and he came upon these men dragging this woman across the road. And meanwhile, all the passerbys, of course, had disappeared. So they brought out their golf clubs, and one of them had a gun or whatever, and they scared this rest of them off. But this boy had, Baula had been shot, and this one was, she was in trauma. She'd lost her baby on the road. She was dragged across the road and whatever. And these people took them to the hospital. And the funny thing is, when he was asked later, his name was Lieutenant Seagert or something. He said, but you go that way towards Taj Mews. Why did you turn this way? He said, I don't know. Something made me turn this way. It was way out of his, normal route.
So even he didn't have an explanation for why he chose that route.
He said, I was just, sent that way.
Yeah, no, remarkable. And then she ended up living the rest of her life.
And in the melee, she
in
lost
Bombay.
her nose, her tip of her nose was cut off.
Yes.
And then she had enough money by then, so
yeah.
She was the chief witness in the murder case, that Baula's murder case. So she was there, and then the case went on. It happened very fast.
Okay.
Maybe about 6 months or 9 months, it was all over.
That also seems remarkable to me in today's world.
Amazing, and today it goes on forever.
Yeah.
So then she lived the rest of her life, like I told you, in some building in Chowpatty. And she used to get...
And you've seen that building?
No, vaguely.
Vaguely, okay.
Then I didn't bother to go and, do some research then.
Yeah.
And then by the time I got really interested, my mother-in-law had gone, so I couldn't ask her. But apparently, a lot of people who have connections with Indore know the story.
I see. Okay. Yeah, in fact, I asked my mother this morning because she didn't, but maybe she just sort of missed hearing about it. My grandfather was in the army of the Holkar, so he for sure would have known all about it. Yeah.
He would have known for sure.
Yeah. It's been wonderful chatting with you, Sadiqa.
Thanks, Sujata.
Got to know another side of you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
I thought you wouldn't make it in time.
Traffic. What can I say?